Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Jamf and their Jamf Now software that helps you manage your Apple devices from anywhere. Get started by setting up your first 3 devices free at jamf.com/MacVoices. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, when I attended WWDC earlier this year, other than the Apple announcements, of course, there was one thing that seemed to be on everybody's conversation list, and that was a film that was screened right before WWDC started called App: The Human Story. I'm happy to welcome Jake Schumacher, the director of App: The Human Story, to MacVoices to tell us about it. Jake, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure, Chuck. Thanks for having me on.
So I really meant that. It seemed like one thing that everybody wanted to talk about was this film. And now, of course, I realize it's a little bit of playing to the audience when you're screening it at WWDC and it's about developers. But at the same time, it made a huge impression on an awful lot of people.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how well the film was received. We went in knowing that people were interested in the subject, and we obviously had some great backers in the project through the whole process. But the reviews that we got afterwards, there was people were just over the top and talking about how raw and honest they felt like the film was, and that we were really speaking for developers in a way that nobody else has really made public. And so we were really excited about that. I mean, that's the kind of films that I want to make.
Well, so we can frame this a little bit. I'm going to play the trailer right now for the audience. Let them see and hear a little bit of it, because obviously it's a trailer, and then we'll come back and let you tell us all about it.
Great.
Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device.
The iPhone keynote was the first one I ever watched, and it was so explosive and majestic. It was just so obvious right away that that would be the future.
The day before, there was just like a buzz and electricity. How awesome is it that that phone did not leak?
It was a whole new world that opened up there, and everybody's trying to figure out how that new world is going to work, and we're still figuring it out.
It blows my mind, and it makes us feel so lucky that this thing that used to be kind of a hobby for us has now become our careers.
Before the iPhone, people didn't download software. It was only nerds who bought software.
There's always going to be a catch-all term for the digital tools that we use. Right now, that term happens to be app.
Making apps for children, it's not a perfect science. It's more like art. This is sort of shaping kids' memories of them growing up. That's a big responsibility. That's something we should be taking very seriously.
I very happily threw away some of my best work at Apple. It taught me that sometimes, like, you have a design and you're looking at it and you're thinking, I don't know what it needs, but it needs a little bit of extra. What that needs is just throwing it away. You put so much into it, it's your baby, kill your baby. Just kill it. And in the end, it always gets better.
So many people I knew attributed this thing to changing their entire livelihood. And I'm obviously one of those people.
Even though I feel I'm helping people, I am growing an industry which is disconnecting people from the real world in some way. And there's constantly a conflict within me.
Not that filmmaking has gone away, or novel writing has gone away, or music, or anything, but that this is the new art form for our generation.
There is an awareness in the culture that the things that we're doing right now have an impact on history.
The breakdown between the digital world and the real world will fall away gradually as we mature technologically, and there won't be a notional app, because everything will be an app, including the world around you. We're going to take the tools at our disposal, and we're going to figure out how to bend materials to our will and shape them into the things that we think are going to make our lives better.
So, first of all, there are a lot of people in there that I know, a lot of friends in the film that it's good to see getting the attention. But let's step back a little bit and talk about how this project got started. What was your inspiration, and why did you decide to attack the app community, the developer community, from this standpoint?
Yeah, I guess the project started. I had a original iPhone, and so did my co-director Jed Hurt, and we both lived in a small town, and we were both really interested in kind of this app renaissance that we were seeing. We were seeing new apps almost daily that were just great pieces of software, and there was this rich community being built up around it. Jed was he's a developer and was considering becoming an iPhone developer. I was doing short films and things, and after winning a short film contest, we were celebrating, having some beers, and I was like, hey, let's make a documentary about you learning how to do app development and making an app. And we worked on that project maybe 2 days before we realized that it was a terrible idea for a film. But that planted the seed of the idea of like, hey, I'm really interested in this, and I think a lot of people are interested in this because these phones were becoming such a big part of our lives. And so I just started from there and digging in, and a big jump in the project happened when I moved down to LA. I became friends with Adam Lizagore over email. He runs Sandwich Video. You've probably seen him, in a tech video ad. He does amazing commercials. And anyways, we became friends, and Adam happened to know a few developers and introduced us. And yeah, he came on as the EP of the project, and that's where it really took off.
So why? I mean, what was there something that fascinated you about the app development process or the people behind it, or was it just an idea and you're a filmmaker and you ran with the idea?
No, I think it came down to delight. I was seeing these apps that there was these random people out in the world that I didn't know that were incentivized to solve little problems in my life. And they were making these tools and these things that would make my life so much easier. And, for a few dollars, I could get this tool, but all of a sudden I now have a software solution, and I loved it. I saw it as a renaissance. I saw as like an equipping of new tools and new abilities that I hadn't had before. And I thought that was interesting to look into.
So were you a big app fan, a big Apple fan prior to this? And the reason I ask is because, again, looking at the people you interviewed just in the trailer, I mean, you picked some pretty heavy hitters, and you also picked a very diverse group of folks.
Yeah, and if I can speak to the trailer, we made that 3 years ago, right when we were first starting the project. And so we have a new one coming out in the next week or two. Our project's even more diverse, and there's even more representation of the developer community. And so we're really proud of the new trailer that's coming out. And yeah, I had converted to the Mac mostly for doing Illustrator work and 3D modeling, and it was just totally converted. I had come up making short films and doing work like that, but I just was always fighting the machine. And I remember just that experience of delight, being introduced to the Mac and like the machine getting out of the way. And I felt like when the apps, seeing the apps in the App Store, there was just so much of that feeling was happening so often that it was very exciting.
Okay. So you just started approaching people and asking them to be part of this. Obviously we had a lot of yeses. Did you have any nos?
Yeah, sure. We've got some no's, and then some people that just said, hey, we'd love to talk, but we don't want to be on camera. One interview like that was with Lauren Brichter that was just so insightful and really helped shape the project, even though he's not in the film. He's just a phenomenal developer and, a great person in the community. So I started out by asking friends down here in Long Beach that were developers. One of the guys that I surf with is a developer and a good friend. Ryan Newsom, he now works for Blizzard on their iOS team. So I interviewed him, and then I have some friends that work for B2B app shop. I guess more than an app shop, but JLoop, two friends there, and interviewed them. And then I cold emailed Craig Hockenberry, and Craig Hockenberry was the first kind of known developer that was like, hey, come on down. He lives 2 hours south of me, or sorry, about an hour south of me. And went down and hung out with Craig and had an amazing interview. He introduced us to some more people, and that's kind of how it started getting rolling.
Did you do kind of an open call, or did you just get referred to other developers? Because some of the people you interviewed are very well known in the community. Others might have 1 or 2 apps out, and they maybe aren't so well known at this point, or at least the point that you did the interviews. How did that part work?
So tackling that from like a filmmaking aspect, Adam Lisgore gave me some great advice. He said, you're always looking for the character. You know, there's plenty of insightful or talented people out there, but they may not be a great character. And so when you're sitting with someone for an hour and a half in a documentary, you want to watch someone who's interesting. You know, there are people that are just interesting when they're just sitting there typing, you know, and so we kept that in mind. And then also with each interview, we'd be introduced to new people, you know, and we'd have new opportunities. And some people, when we first started out, we didn't really know what the film was about. You know, we just thought it was more of like a apps, yay film. You know, we really like this. Here's all these people making these apps. And then what started happening is we started to hear some consistent stories, you know, that were from all different developers. And so there's some people that we interviewed that maybe didn't speak much about kind of what became the issues of the film. And so that's, you know, why they're not in the film. But we are releasing the full interviews from the film as a digital archive. We feel like this is a really important time in software development. And so we want to make that available for the next generations to be able to dive deep and really understand what happened, you know, during this time.
That will be fascinating to see the unedited stuff and the complete. It's almost a story behind the story.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So it sounds like, well, it sounds like this is something that happens in film projects, and I don't know how many you've been involved in prior to this, but it seems that they start out going one way, and then something happens along the way, and they turn into something else. Sort of like some software companies that we both know.
Absolutely. I think you want to be in a place where the best idea wins. And so we discovered this story of sustainability in the App Store, and, you know, these developers that we really were impressed by and were making our lives easier. All the indies were struggling in one way or another. And here it is. Apple has this rich history of, you know, involving the indie developer. You know, Steve Jobs, when he came back to Apple, he has that famous address where he talks about how Apple can't do it alone, that Apple needs the developers. And so a lot of these people were developing for the Mac and were part of that 2 or 3% market share that Apple had when it was at its worst, that kind of saved Apple. And so we see these people that really care about this company and really want to make amazing software for it, but they're struggling because of the way the App Store is set up.
Jake, I'm going to sound like a fanboy, and I recognize that. But do you feel that there's anything special or unique about the particular community that you addressed in this film? Or is this the way all software developers, you think, approach things and handle things and the lifestyle that they lead?
Yeah, I can't speak for other software development communities. Real quick, I will speak to why this is iPhone focused. We have Matthias Duarte in the film. He's the VP of design for Google. He created material design for Android. But the reason we focused on the iPhone is that the iPhone was really the product that brought apps into the general public's, you know, world. Like, grandparents and kids weren't weren't seeking out and downloading software on a regular basis until kind of the iPhone and the App Store. And so we felt this kind of like a cultural object. It was important to, you know, address the iPhone. And yeah, to speak to the Mac community, it feels very unique. People are incredibly generous. People share information. There is such a desire for inclusivity and just keeping each other, supporting each other. We witness so many times where there's a developer in need or something, and just through Twitter, the community surrounds them, and it's a really beautiful community to be a part of.
I agree completely, and it's interesting to hear you express some of the same things that I seem to see when I go to WWDC or really any Apple-focused event. And even the events that maybe aren't Apple-focused, but they have a strong Apple presence, that there's a certain camaraderie that seems to come with app developers. And it does seem like something has happened that's a little extra special with iPhone and iOS developers, I should say. Maybe because it's a different kind of platform. There's so many different things that you can do with it, but perhaps because the audience is so broad that it's no longer just a geek audience. It's everybody that potentially has an iPhone.
Yeah, I don't know if the film would make any money, but I would be so interested in going back and talking to people like Rich Siegel and kind of these patriarchs of the Mac software world, even, going back to the Beagle brothers or whatever. And just there's a certain tone that was set that has carried through in a really unique and special way. And to me, I'm fascinated by it.
Wow. Beagle brothers, you just reached way into the time machine there. That was impressive.
All credit to Stephen Frank on that one. So
okay. Yeah. How about surprises with something like this? I mean, obviously the direction of the film turned as you were making it, but any big surprises that came at you as you did this?
I think most, this is my first feature film, and so I think most of the surprises were just kind of due to inexperience. And just setting out and trying to do something large. I was mostly doing short films and commercials, and, with 3 minutes or 5 minutes, you can really wrap your mind around it, from the beginning of the project. And when you start on the path of something that's, a feature, it's so hard to really see the project. You're just always working in one little small corner. And so I think there was a lot of surprises and a lot of learning, but, it's just like anything that's really hard to do. It's going to be tough, and you're going to have to learn new things. And that's kind of why you get into it, because you have no choice but to learn and to grow. And you just, I guess the pleasant surprises are when you discover that there's a deep story, especially that there's a story that's not being told to the public. I think for a long time, people were really discouraged when they would watch Apple keynotes and they would talk about all the money being sent to developers, and then they would show videos of all the happy developers. There's, I think, in the community that the community didn't feel like that was quite fair. And so to discover that we have a story to share that means so much to a community that we respect so much, I think that was a really pleasant surprise.
Jamf and their Jamf Now software are this week's sponsors of MacVoices. Jamf Now gives you the capability of remotely managing your devices, Macs, iPhones, and iPads. Even better, Jamf Now makes the process simple. No IT expertise needed, so you can focus on your business, not your tech. Setting up your devices with Jamf Now is actually fun. You start with a blueprint that you customize for your devices, the apps and settings that you want to deploy to them. Set up multiple blueprints for multiple devices or users with different needs. For example, the sales team probably needs one set of resources, the service team needs another, and the management team has other needs altogether. Need to get devices already in the field on board? User enrollment makes it easy for them to use the blueprints you've just created to get up to speed and in concert with the rest of the team. Email is the lifeblood of many parts of your organization. Jamf Now lets you automatically configure company email accounts on all your Apple devices. It doesn't matter whether you are using Microsoft Exchange, Google Mail, Yahoo Mail, or your own IMAP or POP accounts. Jamf Now has you covered. Wi-Fi is super convenient, but super dangerous too if you're dealing in confidential information, and these days, who isn't? With Jamf Now, you can set up your devices to automatically join your secure networks. It doesn't matter if you're running WEP, WPA, or WPA2. No more remembering all those annoying, long, secure passwords. Jamf Now does it for you. That's where Jamf Now starts, but there's a whole lot more. Asset tags, app distribution, inventory export so your data isn't trapped on your devices, accessibility and recovery, The list goes on and on. But don't be fooled by all those features. Jamf Now is simple enough for a small business or even for a family to use, but powerful enough for a Fortune 500 company. I want you to find out just how easy it is by visiting jamf.com/MacVoices right now, sign up, and set up your first 3 devices free, regardless of whether they're Macs, iPhones, or iPads. Once you find out just how powerful and useful Jamf Now is, for just a couple dollars per device each month, you can manage your entire fleet of devices, no matter how large that fleet is. Visit jamf.com/MacVoices now and find out just how easy and even fun device management can be. That's jamf.com/MacVoices. jamf.com/MacVoices. Thanks to Jamf for their support of this week's Mac Voices. So let's talk about the film itself, because obviously there's this little detail in any film of financing. So how did you finance the film, and what do you hope to get out of the film?
Yeah, I would be happy to not be in debt when the film is done. I think that would be the end goal. And I think, we're in a pretty good position for that. I think it's mostly just invested time, and that's the risk you take. If you're making an app on spec, you risk your time, and same with the film. But we were really fortunate. When I say we, my co-director and I, Jed Hurt, we spent a long time preparing for our Kickstarter campaign, and we really treated that as our most important kind of pitch to the community. And so we launched with the teaser that you just showed. So we'd already done a lot of legwork and a lot of groundwork, and we had gotten quite a few big names on board at that point, and that really helped. John Gruber was generous enough to post about our project on day one. When we launched our Kickstarter campaign, I remember I was eating breakfast with my family because I was just going to take the morning off after a bunch of days of work, and my phone was just like overheating because I was getting so many notifications that I was like, I love you guys, but I'm sorry, I got to go back to work. And, we were 30% funded within the first 24 hours. And so I think the community was hungry for a film like this and totally showed up and backed the film. And we raised, I think, 163 before taxes and before Kickstarter and Amazon's cut.
So that took care of a big chunk of, I guess, your costs, at least at that point.
Yeah, at least at that point. And I think if I had been a more seasoned filmmaker, I could have totally finished the film with that amount. But it was a great way to start the project.
Okay, so I have to ask these kind of questions. What are you cutting the film in, or what did you cut the film in? As far as an editor,
I'm cutting in. So I'm editing the film in Premiere. I'm a Final Cut 8 guy, but they went and ruined Final Cut, so I've moved over to Premiere. So I just got to say it. I moved over to Premiere, and it's been really good for collaboration. And so cutting the film in Premiere. I've sold my Mac Pro, unfortunately. I've moved to a PC. So I'm very excited about this new Mac Pro that's coming someday, and even more excited about the idea of eGPUs. And so finishing the film on a PC, and I don't know what else I could tell you about that.
Yeah, well, I don't want to dig too far down, but it's always interesting, I think, to see who's using which tools and why. And that would be the next question: why? Any particular reason you shifted over to Premiere, other than the Final Cut evolution? Yeah,
Final Cut, it doesn't have. I think the main issue for me, Premiere has really great round tripping for audio and special effects. It's, you can pull in your After Effects right in there all in one suite, and it's all very interconnected. And there's a lot of regular development happening in Premiere. And so it seemed like the safest way to go with the project. And I think a lot of video editors like myself are kind of in this pain point with Apple right now with the Pro machines. It's all about the GPU. I have a 1070 GPU in here, and it's so critical to get that GPU. And so I think a lot of people are moving to Hackintoshes or PCs. And one little known advantage that I didn't realize when I moved to a PC is that it's just such a terrible, Windows 10 is just so bad that you try not to spend much time in it. So you stay more time editing instead of getting distracted. So
talk about damning with faint praise. That's interesting. Okay.
There's no, I'm not going to get any hate mail for that, hopefully. So
no, well, listen, hey, we're all entitled to our opinions, and at the end of the day, these are all tools, and you have to find the one that works best for you. So, yeah. I think it's interesting that this is going to come out now. We have, I don't know if you've seen it yet or did see it, but the little video that Apple produced before the WWDC keynote this year was all about apps and just how much we rely on them. So it was almost like a perfect thing to go with your film. Now I think we're about to see, as we record this, the last episode of Planet of the Apps, the Apple TV series. And so it just seems like developers and apps and the whole concept seem to be getting a whole lot of attention from everybody at this moment. And you actually predated all of that because of when you started the film.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. So we're about a year and a half late from when we wanted to get the film out. And but the nice thing is that we've used such a long lens to tell this story that there's nothing that's really changed, unfortunately, for developers. And I think Apple is just helping us out. I think Planet of the Apps just makes people really hungry to hear a raw and honest story about what it's really like to develop an app and make a living, because it's not this Hollywood version, with a descending escalator. And, I think there's a hunger for the real story of app development, and we happen to be in a unique place where we have that film from some very reputable voices in the community, and so we're very excited to share it. And the test screening at DubDub really confirmed that we had something special, and that was really exciting.
How much different is the finished film from what was shown at DubDub?
So there's minor edits. Mostly color and sound mix. What I've been going through over the summer is learning how to work with the lawyers. I need to get a letter of fair use and E&O insurance to distribute this film publicly. There was kind of a moment where before we did the test screening that Apple could have shut us down with just a lawsuit. And so just kind of getting the ducks in the row. We're in a good spot now that there's been a public screening, that it's not in Apple's interest or anyone's interest to really sue us. And so to bring a product to market, there are these little unfun, unartistic steps that I've been trudging through this summer. But I got an email from my lawyer today that we're going to have a call tomorrow, and she's made a pass all the way through it. And so we'll see how much footage we can use under the fair use doctrine, which is just an amazing tool for documentary filmmakers. I don't know how familiar you are with it.
Yeah, I'm fairly familiar with it because of producing this. I know I know a little bit about what you can and can't use, should and shouldn't use, and that's why I wanted to make sure I had your permission to show the trailer before we even got into that.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
There's also something else interesting that I seem to be seeing among my friends, and even my non-geek friends. The documentaries are suddenly being viewed as entertainment. That I'm hearing more and more people, they'll come to the office one morning and say, hey, I saw this really interesting documentary on Netflix about X or Y. And I guess documentaries have always been maybe a different kind of entertainment, but at least from my very informal survey of people, it seems like people are paying more attention to this kind of thing as opposed to just the Hollywood studio productions or the TV productions or anything. Do you think that's true? And if so, why?
Absolutely, yeah. Even in my own watching habits, I'm watching more documentaries. And for me, it has to do with the streaming services. I'm more in control of the content that I watch, from now with Amazon Prime, Netflix, and HBO. And yet it takes so long for these Hollywood movies to get out. And yet the world of indie documentaries, there's so many people making documentaries. And so through the streaming services, we just, before there was a tiny little shelf at Blockbuster for documentaries, and now there's a whole wealth of them available to us to stream. And I think that's really exciting, especially with this kind of docu TV series thing that's taken off with like Chef's Table and Abstract and shows like that, where it's a documentary style, but there's 12 episodes. I think that really is kind of the future of documentary.
I think you hit it on the head. There's so many people making more things that at one point documentaries, I believe, were probably viewed as a big budget thing, a la National Geographic, and now it doesn't have to be that way, and so more people can cover more subjects in a lot more depth. I see it as akin to podcasting, that if people want to dive deep into a topic, they can do it a whole lot easier with a documentary or a podcast or anything of that nature than we could before, when things had to be a bit more produced for the masses.
Yeah, and I would encourage anyone that wants to kind of tell a story like we did, maybe consider a podcast first. It's such a amazing platform, and it's so much less expensive to produce, and there's a quicker turnaround on it. And I think there's an alternate version where we did App as a 12-part hour-long podcast, 12-hour podcast series, where I think it would have been just as impactful. I am glad that we did a film, because I think this film it brings the general public into the discussion. I think it's a great way for, developers with their family, when their family wonders, like, what do you do? Now you can just be like, hey, go watch this film. And they're like, okay, I have an idea, of what happens. And it's been really fun screening the film to fellow filmmakers and friends, because they'll text me while they're watching it, especially the, non-developer people. And they'll be like, oh man, I want to get into making apps. And then as the film progresses, they're like, oh, maybe not. And they're like, oh, maybe I do want to get, it's fun to watch, kind of the emotional experience for non-developers as they connect with this world that they didn't really know about. Our goal was to kind of peel the screen off the phone and show the humanity behind each little app.
Well, I think you definitely have. From what I've been able to see, and certainly the conversations at DubDub, it made a huge impression on folks, and I think they very much related to everyone you talked to and to the whole message of the film. And so I'll be anxious to see it in its finished version. And then I'm going to be really anxious to go through all the individual interviews. And I'm just the kind of guy that would do that, because I find these people, again, some are friends, some I've not met, but their whole mindset is fascinating when they take on these projects and give their lives to these apps, so that you and I can have this cool tool to do whatever we're going to do with it.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many people that we interviewed that are, could have their own documentary about themselves. And I hope that from this film that there's other people that are interested in telling stories about developers. And hopefully they can stand on our shoulders and learn from us and use our interviews to, to find out the people to go pursue and talk about, because software, we're never going to hit a point in society where we all decide to throw our phones in the river. I mean, this technology is with us from this point on forever. And so software is going to have such a huge and outsized impact on humanity, and the values being set by these developers in this generation, it's so important. And so, hopefully we see a lot more art created around these people and their work.
So we keep dancing around it. When does it come out? How does it come out? How do folks get to actually see it?
I am hoping to probably mid to late September. We really want to bring it out. I believe we're going to launch on our website and the iTunes store first. Still working out those details. And so you can purchase it there. And then after a window of that, you'll be able to stream it, hopefully on whichever service we can cut a good deal with. But we would definitely, even if we want to bring it to where the masses can see it. We think that's important, even if we leave a little money on the table. I think it's more important that people, can access this on Netflix or Amazon Prime.
Right. the website where folks can go at least, well, there's a new trailer coming out as we recorded this in a couple of weeks. I want to make sure we get a plug in for that, because that's also where they can go and buy the video if they wish.
Yeah, you can pre-order the film right now at appdocumentary.com. And once it's out, we'll send you a link and you'll have a DRM-free version of it. And yeah, we're really excited for people to get into people's hands.
Excellent. So at the end of the day, do you feel like you are a developer, just maybe of not an app, but of a different kind, as opposed to what a lot of us think of as a filmmaker?
I think there's a role. Adam Lizagor coined this term as an app director. And it's kind of the role that John Gruber played in Vesper. So it's you're not the actual developer doing the code, but you're seeing the product from the outside, and you're directing, and you're working with the designers. And during this film, we actually created our own app as an internal tool to make the filming process easier. And so we actually launched an app. And yeah, I feel like I'm a developer in a way, a non-technical developer, but someone that can, it is what directing is. You have a vision and you make it happen, and you find the right people and the right team and you put it together and bring it together.
What kind of future projects do you have going, technical or not technical?
Yeah, so right now I'd like to kind of reboot the app that we created called Quantify. It's a little bit dead. We released it as a subscription app, and apparently people don't really want to pay for subscriptions, or maybe our pricing was wrong. We had alternate tiers from 99 cents on up. So I'd like to reboot that. I am also working on laying the groundwork for my next film, besides just paying the bills, doing commercial and web video work. But I think my next film, I for sure know my next film is going to be about special needs students in public schools. I wasn't aware of this, but kind of being introduced by a friend that in every public school in the U.S., it's legal to restrain or seclude a student, and that it actually happens over 276,000 times a year, with up to 5 to 20 deaths a year inside schools. And I happened to meet these two doctors that are working in Yorba Linda, and they're the only school that uses no restraint or no seclusion under any circumstances. And they're through their research and work, they've replicated this amazing success with these very violent children at the time, and they've kind of unlocked a new way to work with special needs students without this harm or risk. And so been following them as they're trying to work with legislators to literally change how special needs students are treated and give them more dignity. And so may not be too interesting to the Mac world, but to me, it's I think it fits with app, and the app is really a discussion about human dignity as a developer. How do you view humans? Do you see them as someone who is creative and capable of doing awesome things, or do you see them as a consumer of low quality information? That's someone that you extract value from. And so it's in that same vein.
So you sound like you want to be the kind of director that makes films that potentially change the world, or at least gives it a nudge in one direction or another, as opposed to just pure entertainment. Sure.
I would love to be an old man looking back at the causes that I ran into, knowing that I at least threw a punch or two. I think the world is way too big for a little indie director to change, but I think I'm, in the app world, I'm part of a conversation, and I think it's an important conversation to have, and hopefully with special needs. I think what's exciting with the special needs film is that it's really black and white, and I think once people become aware of it, it's very non-political, that if we're asked, we really do care about the dignity of students and kids. And if it's just a money issue, it's like we really can find the will as a society to protect these kids, And so that stuff gets me excited. I think if I can keep figuring out how to pay the bills, doing commercials and stuff like that, it's like I want to have these films, 10 of these films at the end of my life that I can really be proud of.
It's a great sensibility and certainly a great objective, and I wish you the best of luck with it.
Awesome.
So if folks want to get in touch with you, social media presences or preferred ways to contact you?
Yeah, Twitter, at Prevailing City, and hit me up on Twitter. And yeah, that's probably the best place.
Okay, great. Jake, thank you for the time. I've only seen little pieces of your work, but I've just was so impressed and so impressed with how many people talked about it that I was anxious to talk to you and kind of get the backstory on it as much as I could. So now I have, you've probably, I don't know how much back catalog you have of all the interviews, but it sounds like you're going to chew up a good part of my life for the next couple months.
Well, I'm very excited, and thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to hear what you think about the film and also about how you enjoy the interviews. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think there's any question. I'll enjoy it. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. Go check this out, App the Human Story. It really, I think, will impress you. And I say that as someone who has only seen bits and pieces, but it just strikes me as such an important thing if you use an app. And of course, if you're watching this show, I guarantee you use an app. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes, links to subscribe, and to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, SoundCloud, the MacVoices blog, the MacVoices Dispatch, our weekly newsletter, and on MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard that helps you do more with your Apple tech. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.